Hello there. Chatbots and voice assistants are one of the most important tools in today's and especially in tomorrow's world, but who are the people that make them work? The conversation designers. My name is Eran Soroka, head of marketing operations for Coco Hub Conversational Components, and today we have a special guest from Karachi, Pakistan, Saba Khalid. She's the creator of Aurat Raaj, one of the projects we're taking part of that we're most proud of. How are you, Saba?
I'm really good. Thank you so much for inviting me.
So, how did you get to conversation design?
It's been a long journey. I didn't start off knowing that I was a conversational designer. I always just enjoyed reading conversations and seeing the importance of conversations. So, if I can take it back a little while ago, I created a book for my own self and for my friends based out of a lot of conversations on WhatsApp that we were going through, and it was telling stories about my own life, their lives, the country, the religion, the culture, the things that were happening. They were all told through conversation. I never published that book, but that got me really interested in conversation as a tool to change somebody's opinion, provide support, be empathetic. So that I wish I had published that book, but that really did give me like the importance of conversation. It really pushed me to understand it. However, it was much later that I got into conversation design when we started building our chatbot tool called Raaji. And that's where I became a conversational designer because I wanted to provide conversations that were supportive, empathetic, informational around a very, very taboo topic in Pakistan, which is women's reproductive health, specifically topics such as sex education, gender equality, menstruation, consent. So these topics and conversations were really important for us, and that's how I got into conversational design.
And then what specifically brought you to build Raji?
For me, before the conversations through AI or chatbots, we were building a cartoon. And the cartoon that we had created had conversations, but they were told through stories. And the same topics that I'm very, very passionate about, they were embedded in those storylines, and we would go and show them in rural areas, in urban areas. We would put up a projector and we would show that cartoon. And every time that the cartoon would end, we would see that girls had so many questions because for the very first time, somebody had spoken about a topic that their parents, their friends, their classmates, their teachers, they were afraid to talk about. So, it opened up this Pandora's box of like, why does menstruation happen? How long does it last? Does it happen to boys? Why doesn't it happen to boys? So we had all these questions, and often, we didn't have the time to have longer conversations. And we would pack up all our equipment, our multimedia, and we would leave these classrooms after showing that cartoon. And so I thought, okay, how do we continue to have this conversation long term? We can't just leave these girls and say, hey, now we told you the basics, now you go figure it out. So I think at that time, I started speaking to a lot of my own mentors. I was part of an incubation program, and I was seeing how chatbots were being deployed for marketing, for sharing information. You had a cinema bot, you had a e-commerce bot. However, something that's so important, such as education, that's where the application wasn't there. Something that's important like women's empowerment, that's where the application wasn't there. So I saw a huge gap, and I started seeing that, could this be a way for us to provide that education long term? And it could be like available 24/7. It could also be something that has no judgment because humans tend to judge when we're providing information. So I saw this as a way, and then I tried to test it in actual real market in classrooms, and I saw the way that girls responded to having that conversation come through a chatbot. So for me, that was a very interesting journey.
And then you saw a workshop of chatbots on Zoom, and you decided to take it to the next level.
Yes. So I was really struggling. The audience that I had set out for myself, this was during COVID. This was the most excluded audience. There's a huge gender digital divide, but there's also an overall divide in the country when it comes to internet access, internet penetration. Adolescent girls, often are the last ones to get access to information technology. And I knew this when we were going into classrooms because sometimes when the girls would go and use a chatbot, they were learning how to use the laptop for the very first time. So I knew that when the COVID pandemic happened, girls would be the last ones to be able to access quality information and continue learning about their health, their bodies, and other aspects of education. So when this happened, I knew that I had to engage people who were community leaders who could access those girls, who could go door to door and talk to girls. This for me was very important. So how do I get to the community leaders? How do I get to volunteers? How do I get to people who could get that information to the girls who'd actually need it? And then that's when we decided that we're going to use Zoom as a tool to train volunteers, get them excited about this topic, get them informed about this topic. However, for them it was not that interesting to learn through the chatbot, because they obviously had more information already on this topic. So we thought, how about the same information that is embedded in our chatbot? How do we get that information provided through Zoom with an interface, with an avatar? How interesting would that be for everyone, not just kids? And so we did a couple of experiments with you, and we have a lot more experiments happening where there's a full class and they are learning about different topics through our Zoom-based chatbot. We also thought about the possibility to get her avatar more customized and more relevant to the audience. And we've been working on that with you guys as well. And so, and one of the most interesting things about the Zoom-based chatbot that we built with Coco Hub was that it was no longer relevant just to girls. There were so many topics that we were excited about. For instance, we did a conversation on male allies and how they can support menstruation. And this was actual information and knowledge that a lot of men who already know about the basics of menstruation didn't know. They didn't know how to support partners. They did not know how to support their wives or girlfriends or whoever it might be, their daughters.
First off, boys and men need to stop making period shaming or period disgust jokes. If you catch your friend or colleague making one, hold them accountable for their behavior. Also, don't start commenting on women's appearance if you notice weight gain during her cycle.
So for us, we saw the Zoom thing for an opportunity to open up this conversation to a larger audience. And then having me and one of my colleagues do those conversations live, that shows the potential of what we can do in the future with chatbots, especially when they're coming through different channels. So yeah, we're really excited about that particular partnership.
What was the biggest challenge in creating and using Raaji?
I think it was because I come from a journalism background, so writing the conversations is very easy for me. However, I often feel that I have to also have like a bit of a technology background to understand their applications and also to understand what are the limitations of chatbots. So I remember when we first set out and I started learning Dialogflow on my own, and we first built a very open-ended chatbot, and we thought, okay, this is a great way for us to collect what kind of conversations or what kind of questions are asked. However, most of the times our chatbot would fail because it wasn't intelligent enough, it did not have enough data. So for me, this was really a difficult lesson to learn that, you can't have a chatbot solving every problem when it comes to reproductive health. You might need to have more focus, and you might need to, I would say, like realize that you have to build these happy paths or have it more closed-ended instead of having it so open-ended that it's often giving the wrong answers. Another, I think, a challenge for me was that I wanted to make sure that it doesn't give the wrong answer. For a lot of times when you're building a chatbot, when you're in the first few months of it, even if it's giving the wrong answer, it shows you a huge potential of what it can do. For us, giving a wrong answer means that, you're providing, the wrong health information. And so there was a huge, there was a responsibility that comes with being a conversational designer, but also what kind of chatbot tool you're putting out, especially when it comes to a very, very vulnerable audience. You have to make sure that there's no room for error. And, at that moment, I think although the technology has developed rapidly, there is still a lot of limitations. There's still a lot of learning. And also there's still need for more, I would say, testing and experimentation. So I think that's one of the learnings that I had, that you can dream big, but the scope should be limited if you want it to work.
What was the reaction like in Pakistan when you first introduced Raaji?
It was a mixed reaction. A lot of people really, really supported this and they thought this was a very interesting application. However, when I wanted to test it, when I wanted to pilot it, and when I wanted to see how it was respond and in classroom situations or in community hubs, how would it respond? I think I got a very difficult response in the sense that they were like, either their computer labs were not equipped, so we had to provide those devices to them. Sometimes the backlash was that why do you need to do this through technology? Why don't you come to every classroom and provide this information yourself? And I was like, I wish I had that kind of time and I had that big of a team that I could do that. However, at this moment, it's very difficult for us to do that. So also the fact that, why does technology need to play a role right now? I don't think our schools are equipped. It was a combination. And then there was the fact that this information should only be given by parents or by caregivers. You have no right to come into classrooms or come into community hubs and start this conversation. So it was like that was the hardest one for me to take because when you've done an innovation, you're like, oh, everyone should support me. It's been so hard, and you find out that there's a whole range of criticism that comes, and despite that, you have to come up with ways that you address those problems, but at the same time keep your work going, keep your work in process. So that for me was also an interesting journey and learning.
There's also the problem that Pakistan is a country of 220 million people, and you can't go like personally to every class and talk to every person.
That I think this is something that used to give me the most hope and inspiration and never stopped me from going, especially when the criticism was really loud and then things were, we didn't have the funding, we didn't have the support. So far as my own family was not very supportive of our work. So having that first community build that was supporting me, that was missing. So I think that what got me going is when I saw girls actually having this conversation in classrooms and then later in community centers. That's when I saw like, okay, this is working. These are important topics. Maybe the tool right now is not 100% perfect. However, there's potential for me to make it better. There's potential for me to build a bigger team that can take this to different directions, test it out. So I think seeing actual interaction of girls was the most uplifting thing and pushed me forward the most.
How big was the audience of the people that talked with it already?
So our first pilot had 500 girls, and before the interaction with Raaji, a lot of them had myths and misinformation about, why do periods happen, or what kind of things you need to do during your period, what shouldn't you do during your period. For instance, one of the most alarming things was that girls did not bathe for over 7 days during that time. And this was something that had to be changed because this was causing a lot of vaginal infections in the country. So by providing this information to 500 girls, we not only this led to them attending school during that time, taking a shower during that time, and overall all these myths that they had, they were removed. And 95% increase in their school attendance that was previously they were dropping out or they were skipping school during that time. And I also realized during this time that, the way that we were checking or addressing their impact of this particular tool, that had to be long term. So we couldn't assess how important or how impactful it was over maybe one session. We had to go over and over again to change mindsets, but also to see how this mindset had changed over a 6 months period of time. So we followed these girls, these 500 girls over 6 months, and we gave sessions over and over again to make sure that their minds had changed about this topic completely.
What's the most interesting or funny thing that happened to you as a conversation designer?
I think, so I really started enjoying being a conversational designer. So this might not be very relevant to Raaji, but when I'm bored or when I need to just amuse myself, I make bots for my nephew, and my nephew has this obsession with poop. So most of the conversation is all about poop, and it makes my nephew laugh so much, and he's gotten so addicted to seeing how chatbots could be built, how quick they are to you can build it together, and then how important the conversation is. So I test my own conversation skills. If I'm able to make him laugh in like 5 minutes, I've done a great job. If I'm not able to make him laugh with the bot, then I fail as a conversation designer. So for me, like we have to think about all the different ways that chatbots could be applied, just even for our own families. Like I heard about a very interesting application within Coco Hub of somebody who had built a chatbot for someone who very close to them who had passed away, and this was for them a way to bring them back to life, or to just remind themselves about the connection that they had. So we have to see chatbots more than just something that software developers do for large companies. It has to be applied in various scenarios, and however it solves a problem, that you should try and apply it.
Both you and I are coming from background of journalism, but if somebody wants to be a conversation designer like we are now, what tips or advice can you give this person?
I think the key skill that one must have is having a lot of empathy and being authentic in their conversation. So how you would speak to a 5-year-old, how a 5-year-old would speak back to you, how a girl in a certain situation would be thinking about a certain topic. You have to put yourself in that situation, and only then can you write great conversation. So being authentic and having a lot of empathy, that's the key to being a good conversation designer. And also testing a lot of different ways that people have done build chatbots. So that's something that will give you more. For instance, I see Jason's conversations with chatbots that he's built, and it's hilarious, and it gives me a lot of like ideas of how I can also build my conversations, even though the application is entirely different, but the way that he puts them together, those are very inspirational for me as well.
Okay, thanks again, Saba Khalid, the creator of Raaji. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you so much, and I look forward to meeting more conversation designers.
And I really hope that everybody watching will go and change people's life for the better like you do with Raaji. But until then, you can go and start CocoHub.ai, where we bring chatbots to life and giving you all the tools, resources, and knowledge you need to create human-like chatbots with personality like Raaji. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Eran. Take care. Bye.